So I'm Brian. My name is not Chad. I can confirm that. And I'm here to talk about stickers. So who's ready for this? All right. So I could not plan this even better, but also I did see the title. So I am going to talk about swag and talk about our decisions with swag at GitHub, and then also why we have so many stickers. But this is going to be a lot of looking back and history of how we got this Octocat thing. So if you guys are here for that, it's awesome. I honestly do not know what talks upstairs, but it might be just as good. So watch that video. So has anybody ever seen this brand before, Supreme? Does anybody have own clothing from Supreme? No? All right, this is a perfect crowd then. So Supreme is, I tend to go to a lot of European cities for whatever reason, because DevRel, right? As well as I was in Tokyo not too long ago. So whenever I'm in a European major city like Paris or Berlin, I try to find a Supreme store and kind of see what it looks like. Mainly because I'm actually close to this brand. Not that I actually know anybody there or wear any of their clothes. But Supreme actually started this current wave. They didn't start it, they're actually on top of it. They didn't start anything. But they are part of this modern streetwear culture where people will spend $200 on a sweater that looks like this, that just says Supreme on it. I usually have my laptop up. I have a Supreme GitHub sticker. So we have awesome illustrators that just do a lot of random stuff. But the reason why I'm close to this brand is because I grew up as a skateboard kid. So I used to skateboard and thrash on banks and do stairwells and stuff like that. So I know I'm so mild-mannered and professional today, but I was a hoodlum growing up. But what I like about this culture and I like about Supreme built the modern version of all these boutique shops where they'd have the clothes on the outside and they have all this dead space on the inside. And the reason for that is because kids would come in. So the Supreme started 94-ish, and they'd have these Supreme shops, and you wear your backpack in there, you'd have your skateboard, and if the clothes are always in the middle of the shop, then people would always knock stuff over. It was hard to hang out, and they would create an environment for people to hang out in the middle of the store, because most people didn't come in to buy expensive clothing in New York. That's actually where they started. So talk about modern streetwear culture. You can follow me on Instagram. That's fine. I'm not trying to push for followers, but I tend to follow a lot of streetwear culture and shoes on Instagram. That's what Instagram is for me. I know everybody has their own Instagram style and what they like. But this one person, there's a photographer who takes pictures of this guy who takes modern streetwear, fashion apparel, and then he wears it. And that's him. So this is literally Kanye West and Travis Scott, and they're popular pictures on Instagram that he's recreating it. And the funny part about that's the culture's so in depth that this guy's literally a retired factory worker who just started wearing streetwear because he had nothing else to do. And he's really into Supreme right now. And I just thought that was fascinating. But it's fascinating because the Supreme brand is Stretch and all these streetwear fashion, the Off-Whites and Ivy Park, they have a culture that people can really identify with, and it makes you feel good. Even though it's $250 for a shirt, probably not the best use of your money, but I wanted to actually take a step back too as well. I'm gonna get the stickers, but I want to talk about this brand. Does everybody know FUBU, Forest Bias? So the cool thing about this is, so Damon, who's on Shark Tank, I don't watch the show, but he does the judging for the giving you lots of money if you have a good idea. Well, he got started with FUBU, and he got started in Queens at the time where hip hop culture was really starting to expand outside the Bronx. And what he would do is he would just take his logo, and they would put on a Champion sweater. So I know Champion's coming back, all these Champion sweaters, but they usually just have the C or Champion in the middle. And he would take the FUBU logo and put it right on the Champion sweater, and then he would give that out to people. And he figured out this really cool thing where he would go to clubs and find bouncers because the cheaper sweaters are always the biggest ones. So he'd find bouncers who are 6'8" and 350 pounds and be here, you want to wear this sweater? Because it's hard to find clothes that actually fits a man of that stature. You have to go big and tall, and usually it's, back in the 90s, it's usually husky is what they called it. I wasn't husky, but my older brother was husky, so shout out to David, who was husky. So he would just put that on there, and he created a brand by literally just giving clothes to people who normally could not find nice clothes. And then every time people would go in the club, they're always around the famous people, and they'd be oh, what are you wearing? It's FUBU, it's Forest Bias. So anyway, talking about GitHub. And anybody heard of GitHub? I know we're in the GitHub room, your badge says GitHub. I work for GitHub, so it's redundant that my badge says GitHub and GitHub, but that's besides the fact. you guys want me to explain GitHub? I know this is like DevRel, and you guys probably know it. So like a decentralized platform built on an open source protocol called Git. All right, I've been practicing that, so I'm glad you guys appreciate it. But so my job is I 100% swag surf, and sorry that I missed that. You guys don't understand. All right, swag surfing it's a thing. Look it up, Urban Dictionary. So I'm a developer advocate at GitHub. I don't need to explain what that is because you guys all are doing this. But my full-time job is basically to capitalize the H on people's tweets and branding. So since Joe Nash no longer is with us at GitHub, that's my full-time job. But one thing that I realized once I joined GitHub, because I did DevRel for the place we'll have the after party tonight, which is Netlify. That was the first place I knew like I could do DevRel. Like I was always, like so many of us, like we write blog posts, we speak, we write code, and we sort of like transition this like magically. We just figure out we can do this job, and that's how I sort of found it. And we went through a lot of like ideation of trying to figure out what swag to give away. And when I got to GitHub, I was like, hey, I'm going to this RailsConf thing. Can we like make some swag? And they're like, yeah, we don't do that. And I was like, oh, why not? And it's like, because we don't do swag, we do stickers. So at a certain point, GitHub used to give away a lot of free shirts and a lot, like, did everything everybody else did. But you get like this inflection point where people just know your brand enough that they'll pay $200 for it. Like no one's paying $200 for a GitHub shirt, but like for Supreme, like people want that brand and they identify with it enough. So like you have to, like we found that point of like, hey, we've hit inflection. Like why are we giving it away for free? So I just wanted to also mention GitHub is not a t-shirt company. We're a decentralized platform built on an open source protocol called Git. But we do have a shop. So like we still allowed you to identify the brand through the shop. And we have some special run things, like the thing I'm wearing right now. We have this crew cut, which is hard to get. But we tend to sell these in person at conferences. And so it's like a nice reason to come to our conference. Like you can find this and you can buy it. And you can be that person. It's like, hey, I look like B. Dougie. But GitHub is a sticker company. And like we've really leaned right into that whole sticker craze too as well. I was at DevRelCon China last year, and I spoke about Beyonce. That was actually in my talk. I'm not even joking. But there, I saw firsthand of how people really wanted to actually have our stickers. Like, China is a place that we don't operate professional. Like, we operate because you can use GitHub for free, but we don't actually have presence in China as of today. And so they don't get stickers as often as like we get stickers here. So like we have a whole table back there of stickers, and like we're all like, hey, we've got that one, we got this one. My kid has these all over our TV stand. Like, why am I going to take more so they can continue to graffiti and be a hoodlum in my own living room? But China is like a place where I will bring as many stickers as I can and try to look legal as possible, because I get a lot of questions and you have to like fill out tax forms. Yeah, be careful when you ship stickers. People always want to like pay taxes on that, depending on if you're in a third world country. But as I talk about stickers, I have to talk about the Octocat and where it came from. So everybody familiar with the Octocat? I've seen it around. I know we have like stickers here. I'm wearing one of them right now. Does anybody know the story of Octocat? So here's the story. I'll read it. It's once upon a time, there was a cat who named Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa and her owner went to the beach. When Mona Lisa got to the beach, her owner Kelly gave goggles so Mona Lisa could swim and see what was in the ocean. When Mona Lisa went into the water, she found lots of fish. And when Mona Lisa was swimming, she was so excited, she opened her mouth and swallowed a coral that made you grow legs like an octopus. But keep your normal face. So Mona Lisa grew legs and became Miss Mona Lisa Octocat. That's the story of the Octocat. So one of the early engineers at GitHub, his daughter actually wrote this story. So Mona Lisa actually had no story until his daughter actually wrote it. So we've adopted that. So like in our Slack channel, you can actually ask Hubot, which is our bot, to tell us a story, and they'll tell you the story of Mona Lisa. And that's why there's like, I do get my stuff proofread, so the typos are actually the original. So, but the thing actually is that a lot of people don't know is that this Octocat actually came from a stock photo website. Anybody know that? Yeah, so it was like literally picked off a shelf and was like, okay, that's our company brand. And it's because the founders actually identified and like, oh, that's cute enough. Let's just like leverage that, and like that's our brand. And it was like, not that it was intentional, but I don't think the brand that expanded into now I'm wearing a crew cut that's hard to get. Like it didn't grow to that, but it sort of like it became that because it's by chance almost. Yeah, I'm sort of speaking circles, but yeah, basically it's by chance. And it was actually created by this guy, Simon Oxley. So he also created the original Twitter bird. So it's the one that's not today, but the one that was like 10 years ago. He also created DigitalOcean's Shark as well as some other brands. So, and those are all stock photo things that he just was experimenting with like Japanese art, and he just had a list of them, and people were picking off the shelf. Which now that's his full-time job. Well, I believe he's doing okay right now financially, but if you want to contract him, he is contracting for logos. But then shortly after that, like within a year, we actually hired full-time graphic designers to come on the GitHub and full-time make all these random Octocat arts. And I think one of the first ones was the 404, where we took Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to make that. Legally, I think Disney doesn't want me to say that out loud. But anyway, we made that, and that's our 404 page. And then we have this 500 page that never shows because we never have 500. So you probably haven't seen that very often. Just kidding. And then we have this whole list on the right of Octodecks. So if you go to octodecks.github.io, you have about 147 different Octocats that we are publicly allowed and legally allowed to share because of parity laws, which is awesome. But a lot of people don't know, it's like as of today, we have 5 full-time staff that are making Octocats. So this is illustrations, this is graphics, this is like all of the above. It's because we saw the reaction to the reception of the Octocat itself, and we're like, why don't we just continue to do Octocats? So shortly after we got our Series A, which was like rather large, we ended up like building this entire office, which is the office that a lot of us were at the Speaker Center for. And this is actually the largest modeled Octocat to date. So this like solid piece of Octocat, and it's actually in our office. So as you walk in and you check in through security, you'll see this giant statue. And this was like one of our earliest designers had like an idea, like let's just go ahead and make this sculpture and make it work. And it's like a lot of the Octocats that we have that we've developed over the years. It's just like ideas internally, whether the designers or engineers or just random marketers or customers. We listen and then we're like, okay, well we'll build that. So this is actually from our GitHub universe. Where we used to do it actually across the street towards the water, around a corner. But yeah, this is a giant inflatable Octocat. So it's like one of the earlier conferences that we did, GitHub Universe. But the cool thing about this is like a lot of this I was not around for. So we use GitHub to build GitHub. Not sure if you guys knew that. And what that means is because everything's stored in the Git, it's actually stored. I can go back to the first marketing issue and the first illustration issue and find out the story of all Octocats and where they came from. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to share about some Octocats and why they exist. So back in June of actually 2013, there was actually a conference called MagmaConf. And what they did is they took it upon themselves to create their own Octocat for their conference because they love the Octocat so much and they identified with it. So the following year, the 2014, which is what I showed the previous slide, one of our, actually I don't remember if it was an engineer or not, but one of our coworkers had the idea of like, hey, why don't we actually lean into this and build a luchador Octocat, which we did. So I went through all the old issues and grabbed some sketches, and this is like the ideation of like the back and forth of like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, how does this work? And it's a lot of like listening, because not everybody's like into Mexican wrestling or know like the reason for the mask and all this other stuff. But because we had hubbers who are from Mexico and understand that whole culture, we were able to identify and like say, okay, well, why don't we put the Octocat logo directly over the eyebrows, because that's where the logos go. Like literally, this is the conversation I was reading last week. Actually, 2 weeks ago, I was in Berlin, just sort of like discovering this talk. And the other cool thing is another one of our earlier support engineers made this remark about the whole Octocat. So this is like about 5 years in the GitHub. Like we've been using the Octocat for a couple years now, and like we realized that people were identifying with this, so we continued to lean right into this thing. Again, I want to say it was like by accident. I think there were some intentions there of like continuing doing this thing. But we found an opportunity to grow our community as well. So when we had the idea of going into India and doing participating, one of our solution engineers wanted to participate in one of the conferences there. We started doing all the legwork to build this Satiricat. And quite honestly, like I'm not even sure the full history of this, but like all the examples that were shown were different models and different Indians that were showcasing this sense of style. And I'm able to go back and learn about Indian culture. And like this is like different, and we have 2 Indian cats, but this is like a whole different culture than the other Indian cat. And I'm able to find out the whole story and history about that. And I'm able to educate myself on this culture and then go into that environment and say, hey, I've got the sticker, here you go. Like one of my favorite things to do is take the Mountie cat. Whenever I go to Canada, like I make sure I have like pockets full of those and like cross the border and they don't ask questions because I'm American. I'm just kidding. But yeah, this is the conversation back in 2014 of like, hey, we're going to this great Indian developer summit. Like, let's bring something that's unique to that brand and that culture, so that way they can help identify with our brand when we leave and when we come back. They're like, hey, you're the one with those stickers. So every sticker actually has a story like this. Like none of our stickers are just unique and like we just developed and like, hey, cool, let's just put Batman cat and like Superman cat. Okay, well we did do that, but we don't share those. Like these cats are specifically for those communities, and I think we have like a real opportunity as we now are looking like San Francisco. Like we're super saturated. Like if you go to a San Francisco meetup, there's no one's hurting for a job, or some people are, but like you don't have to really bend over backwards to try to get developers in the room. It's a little different when you go to new regions, and like as GitHub, like we're looking at other regions and like where we should be. Like I mentioned, like China is a place that like we have some weird trade things going on with our government and stuff like that. But like we're trying to figure this out and try to figure out like when we enter those cultures, like providing those representation. So the reason why we have 147 Octocats is because representation matters and like identifying with those communities really matter. Sorry, thank you. I acknowledge your paper. So does anybody know what this guy is? It's a piece of American culture that is lost in history. But the cool thing about this is that, so this is Benjamin Banneker. I didn't know who this guy was until I saw the Octocat that we created for him, which looks like this. This is Benjamin Banneker. And Benjamin Banneker is actually an individual who kind of surpassed a lot of the limitations that African Americans had back in the 1800s. So he was an astronomer, he was a hobbyist mathematician. He actually surveyed all of the District of Columbia and like sort of like helped out with the maps of the DC. And like he's lost in history, but like GitHub was able to bring this out and actually identify that this person exists through our Octocats. So like we have a story behind this Octocat now. And this story actually started because one of our identified black coworkers decided, hey, it's Black History Month. Like we don't have any black Octocats. Like we should definitely have something that looks like me. And from there, we had this whole ideation back and forth with the illustration team of like, hey, here are some black figures. Like we should probably make a cat that supports this. Like we have the Ada cat at this point. Like can we also do like maybe someone who identifies within this culture and like the diverse group that we're actually trying to achieve and attain and like have hire and interview and stuff like that. So we went back to illustrations and we discovered that Benjamin Banneker had this like really unique story about he wasn't seen until he started sending letters to Thomas Jefferson. And this whole thing about representation and not being seen, like he was like the epitome of like black culture and not being seen. And he was saw because he would send letters to Thomas Jefferson to the point where Thomas Jefferson's like, oh, well, maybe black people are human and maybe we can actually have conversations with them. So he like elevated us to be 3/5 of a person in the States at that point. I mean, it's a joke, I'm sorry, but like in the early 1900s, we finally became, actually in the 1960s, we became a full person. But that's a whole other story, a whole other talk. But the cool thing about this is that like now we are identifying, like we have this organization at ERG called the Black Cats. And now we have Black Cat stickers that look like this. And then when we go into like recruiting and HR events, like we can lead with like, hey, black people matter at our company. Like we have an Octocat, we have a Black Cat, and we have 6 of them. And you're able to have these, and like we don't actually sell these in the shop. These are like our black engineers black coworkers, not just engineers, can now hand out these and you can identify with us and say, hey, this is us. And this is the same for the Octogatos, which is our Latinx group, and our Ada Cats, as well as our Octoqueers as well. So I want to show you the rest of my slides. I'm gonna say exit. So what I'm getting at is like lean into what works. We started doing this thing where you could build your own Octocat, as Jess mentioned earlier. So now we're going into conferences, and we have this whole setup where you can actually build your own Octocat from scratch. Well, we have templates. From a template and add all the stuff that you identify with, and then you can print that sticker directly at the conference. It's a cool thing we just started doing in Berlin 2 weeks ago. So if you're interested, myoctocat.com. And this is my Octocat. This is what I made. While everybody was announcing features on stage, I was actually announcing my new Octocat, so come find me. So with that being said, like, we have opportunity to be like our brand ambassadors. Like we can capitalize the H's wherever we want, but also we're able to like limit that. So when you have the conversation about what swag we should get, let's not do like t-shirts. Let's not do this. Like let's see, it doesn't have to be stickers as well. Like let's do something that actually identifies with the community that we're going into. So stuff we all get, swag. And also, I just want to mention, just give it away for something too. Like there are options to opt people in, to hand things out. There's also some objectives you could do as well. We like to do giveaway for open source contributions. This is the picture of my laptop that's not here. Just want to remind you, GitHub is a sticker company. Thank you very much.